Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the massive glass dome that covered the signing ceremony on Nexus Prime and watched thousands of alien delegates cheer with joy. The sound was strange because each species made different noises when they were happy. The Keth warriors roared like thunder, while the Zephyrian scientists clicked their metal fingers together in rapid patterns. Other species whistled or hummed or made sounds that human ears could barely hear. Everyone was celebrating the end of the Void War. For 3 long years, the galaxy had watched the Keth Empire and the Zephyrian Collective tear each other apart. Whole star systems had burned. Billions of people from dozens of worlds had died. Trade routes had closed. Fear had spread to every corner of known space. But now it was finally over. Morrison looked down at his hands and noticed they were shaking. Slightly, not from fear but from anger. He knew something that all these cheering aliens did not know. The war had been fake. Every battle and every death had been planned from the very beginning. The Keth and the Zephyrians had never really been enemies. They had been working together the whole time. Captain Lisa Hayes moved closer to Morrison and whispered in his ear. She was his best intelligence officer, and she looked worried. Her datapad showed new information that confirmed what they already suspected. The enemy fleets were moving into position around human space. Everything was going according to their plan. Morrison remembered the moment 3 days ago when everything had become clear. Human deep space scouts had been monitoring radio signals between the warring fleets. Most of the messages were coded, but human computers were very good at breaking codes. What they found changed everything. The messages were not battle plans between enemies. They were coordination signals between allies. The Keth and Zephyrian commanders had been working together to make the war look real. While they prepared for something much bigger, they had been building up their forces and positioning their fleets for a joint attack on humanity. Down on the main stage, Keth warlord Graxus raised his massive clawed hand toward the crowd. His armor was black and covered with battle scars that told the story of 1,000 fights. Next to him stood Zephyrian Prime Minister Veltar, whose silver mechanical body reflected the lights from above. They had spent 3 years pretending to hate each other. Now they were about to sign a peace treaty, and the galaxy was celebrating. Morrison knew the real reason for this peace treaty. The two most powerful military forces in the galaxy had realized that humanity was becoming too strong too fast. In just 200 years, humans had spread from one small planet to dozens of star systems. They had developed new technologies that made older alien civilizations nervous. They had shown that a young species could compete with ancient empires that had ruled space for thousands of years. The aliens were afraid of human growth and human innovation. They had decided that the best way to stop humanity was to work together. But they could not just announce an alliance because other species would ask questions. They needed a reason to combine their fleets. A fake war followed by a peace treaty was the perfect cover. Lisa showed Morrison her datapad again. Satellite images from the outer systems showed Keth dreadnoughts and Zephyrian battle carriers moving through hyperspace together. They were heading toward human colonies. The attack would begin as soon as the peace treaty was signed and the galaxy stopped paying attention to military movements. Morrison touched the communication device on his wrist. It was connected to a network that could send messages instantly across the galaxy. This was one of the new human technologies that made aliens nervous. Traditional faster-than-light communication had delays measured in hours or days. Human quantum entanglement networks could send information instantly across any distance. The crowd cheered louder as Graxus and Veltar finally reached the signing table. The peace document was written on a sheet of metal that could survive for thousands of years. Cameras from every major news network in the galaxy focused on the historic moment. Diplomats from 47 different species watched as the two leaders prepared to end the bloodiest war in recent galactic history. Morrison knew he had to act soon. Human fleets were already moving into defensive positions around key colonies and trade routes. The Phoenix Protocol had been planned for exactly this situation. If the galaxy ever turned against humanity, they would be ready to fight back. But he had hoped they would never need to use it. Lisa received another message on her datapad and her face went pale. Keth and Zephyrian ships had just appeared at the edge of 3 different star systems. They were not hiding anymore. The attack was about to begin. The signing ceremony reached its climax as both leaders placed their marks on the peace treaty. Graxus used a claw to scratch his name into the metal, while Veltar printed his signature with a laser from his fingertip. The crowd exploded with joy. Fireworks lit up the sky above the dome. Music from a dozen different worlds played at the same time, creating a sound unlike anything anyone had ever heard. Morrison activated his wrist communicator and spoke quietly into it. His message was simple, but it would change everything. Phoenix Protocol was now active. Every human fleet commander would receive the signal within seconds. They would know that the galaxy had turned against them and that humanity was now fighting for its survival. He looked around at all the celebrating aliens and felt sad for them. Most of them really believed that peace had come to the galaxy. They did not know that the real war was just beginning. They did not know that their leaders had lied to them. They did not know that humanity was about to face the greatest threat in its history, but Morrison also felt proud. Humanity had suspected this trap and had prepared for it. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were not helpless. Human ships were faster and more flexible than alien vessels. Human crews could adapt and improvise in ways that aliens could not understand. The galaxy thought it knew everything about humanity, but it was wrong. The peace treaty was signed, and the ceremony ended with one final burst of celebration. As the crowds began to leave, Morrison stayed behind and watched the empty stage. In 24 hours, this same dome might be filled with smoke and fire instead of joy and music. The real test of humanity was about to begin. Commander Alex Stone was eating breakfast in the mess hall of the UHS Explorer when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the ship, and the voice of his communications officer echoed through every corridor. Enemy ships had just appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. Lots of them. Alex dropped his coffee cup and ran toward the bridge. The Explorer was a science vessel, not a warship. It carried telescopes and laboratories instead of weapons and armor. Alex had brought his crew of 40 researchers and engineers to Kepler to study a strange new type of star. Now they were trapped in the middle of what looked like the biggest space battle in galactic history. The main screen on the bridge showed a sight that made Alex feel sick. Dozens of massive ships were coming out of hyperspace jumps all around them. Keth dreadnoughts that looked like floating cities covered in gun turrets. Zephyrian battle carriers that gleamed like silver daggers in the starlight. They were working together in perfect formation, just like they had practiced this attack for years. Lieutenant Ben Carter was monitoring radio signals from across the galaxy, and his face was white with shock. The same thing was happening everywhere. At once, every major human colony was under attack. New Terra with its 5 billion people. Haven Colony, where humans grew food for dozens of star systems. Sanctuary Station, which served as the main hub for human trade and diplomacy. All of them were surrounded by enemy fleets. Alex realized that this had been planned for a very long time. The enemy knew exactly where every human ship and base was located. They had timed their attacks perfectly to hit every target at the same moment. The peace treaty signing had been the signal to begin the coordinated assault on humanity. Back on Earth, President Karen Wells was sitting in an emergency meeting with the Human Defense Council. The situation reports kept getting worse every few minutes. General Nick Palmer spread holographic star maps across the conference table and showed her the scope of the disaster. Red dots marked enemy fleet positions. Blue dots showed human forces. There were 5 red dots for every blue one. Palmer explained that the aliens had used the 3 years of fake war to position their fleets and gather intelligence about human defenses. While the galaxy thought the Keth and Zephyrians were destroying each other, they had actually been preparing for this moment. Supply ships disguised as refugees had mapped every human trade route. Diplomatic missions had identified key military installations. Tourist vessels had photographed important facilities. Dr. Emma Foster entered the meeting room carrying a tablet full of technical data. She was the head of human military research, and she looked both worried and excited at the same time. The worried part was obvious. Humanity was facing extinction. But the excited part came from something she had been working on in secret for the past 2 years. Emma explained Project Prometheus to the president and the military leaders. Traditional faster-than-light communication worked by sending signals through hyperspace. But hyperspace had rules and limits that created delays. Messages took hours or days to travel between star systems. This meant that fleet commanders had to fight battles with old information and could not coordinate their actions in real time. Human scientists had discovered a way around this problem using quantum entanglement. By linking special crystals at the atomic level, they could create instant communication across any distance. When something happened to one crystal, its partner would change immediately, no matter how far away it was. Human ships could now share information and coordinate their actions instantly across the entire galaxy. The first major battle was already beginning at the Vega shipyards, where Captain Ryan Torres commanded a small defense fleet. His ships were outnumbered 10-1, but they had something the enemy did not expect. Every human captain could see what every other human captain was seeing in real time. They could share targeting data and tactical information instantly. Torres watched the enemy formation approach his position and noticed something important. The Kef and Zephyrian ships were using standard military formations that were thousands of years old. They moved in predictable patterns and followed rigid command structures. Their commanders were probably very good at what they did, but they had learned to fight wars the same way their ancestors had fought wars. Human tactics were different, because humans had learned to fight on Earth where nothing was predictable. Earth had storms and earthquakes and floods that could change everything in seconds. Human military doctrine emphasized flexibility and adaptation. Every ship captain was trained to improvise and make quick decisions without waiting for orders from headquarters. The battle at Vega began when Torres ordered his ships to attack in a pattern that made no sense according to traditional military thinking. Instead of forming neat lines and exchanging fire at long range, his ships scattered in all directions and attacked from unexpected angles. The enemy formation tried to respond, but their commanders were confused by tactics that did not follow any known pattern. Torres used the instant communication network to coordinate attacks that would have been impossible with traditional technology. His ships could act like parts of a single organism with perfect coordination. When one ship needed help, another ship was already moving to assist before the first ship even sent a distress call. Commander Stone watched the battle reports from his position in the Kepler system and began to understand what was happening. The aliens had superior numbers and firepower, but they were fighting like aliens had always fought. Humans were fighting like humans, which meant they were doing things that aliens did not expect. The enemy ships around Kepler were maintaining a standard blockade formation that was designed to prevent escape. But Stone realized that they were following a pattern from military textbooks. They had arranged their ships to counter traditional human tactics, but humans were not using traditional tactics anymore. Stone ordered his science vessel to begin broadcasting false sensor readings that made it look like there were human warships hiding behind the local moon. The enemy fleet immediately moved to investigate the phantom contacts. While they were distracted, Stone activated his ship's experimental drive system and escaped toward the edge of the system. President Wells received updates from battles across human space and realized that something unexpected was happening. Human forces were supposed to be quickly overwhelmed by superior numbers. Instead, the fighting was lasting longer than anyone had predicted. Some human fleets were actually winning against impossible odds. General Palmer updated his holographic display and showed the president what the instant communication network was revealing. Human commanders were sharing information and adapting their tactics faster than enemy commanders could respond. Traditional military doctrine assumed that communication delays would limit coordination between distant units. When that assumption was wrong, everything else changed. 2.Dr. Foster explained that the quantum entanglement network was doing more than just improving communication. It was allowing human forces to evolve their tactics in real time based on what worked and what did not work in each battle. Successful strategies were immediately shared across the galaxy. While failed approaches were quickly abandoned, the aliens had planned this attack assuming that humans would fight like every other species in the galaxy. They had calculated exactly how long it would take to defeat each human fleet using standard tactical models. But humans were not following the standard models. They were improvising and adapting and doing things that had never been tried before. As the first day of fighting ended, both sides were learning important lessons about their enemies. The aliens learned that humans were more unpredictable and dangerous than they had expected. Humans learned that they could survive against overwhelming odds if they were willing to throw away everything they thought they knew about space warfare. Lieutenant Commander Sam Rodriguez was staring at a problem that seemed impossible to solve. His small squadron of 12 ships was supposed to defend the Centauri belt mining colonies against a Keth armada of over 200 vessels. The math was simple and terrifying. Each enemy ship was bigger and more powerful than anything in his fleet. He needed a miracle or a very clever trick. Sam had grown up on a farm on New Kansas where his family raised cattle and grew corn. His father had taught him that when you cannot win with strength, you have to win with brains. Sometimes the smallest dog in the pack could chase away the biggest bull if it was smart enough and brave enough. Sam was about to test that theory. In Space. The idea came to him while he was looking at a freight manifest from one of the mining stations. The Centauri belt was full of old cargo ships and industrial vessels that had been abandoned when the war started. Most of them were broken or empty, but they still had basic power systems and communication equipment. Sam realized he could turn them into something the enemy would never expect. He called his chief engineer, Lieutenant Maria Santos, and explained his plan. They were going to create ghost ships using holographic projectors and sensor scramblers. The abandoned cargo vessels would broadcast false signatures that made them look like human battleships and cruisers. From a distance, the enemy would see a massive fleet defending the mining colonies. Maria thought Sam was crazy, but she agreed to help him anyway. They had 6 hours before the Keth armada arrived at Centauri. That was just enough time to install basic equipment on 20 abandoned ships and program them to act like a real fleet. The holographic projectors would create visual illusions while the sensor scramblers would fool enemy scanning equipment. While Sam was setting his trap in the Centauri belt, Dr. Beth Collins was making a discovery that would change the entire war. Her laboratory on Mars had been studying captured alien technology for months, trying to understand how enemy weapons and defenses worked. What she found was both surprising and encouraging. Beth realized that alien technology was incredibly advanced, but also incredibly standardized. The Keth had been using the same basic ship designs for over 3,000 years. The Zephyrians had perfected their manufacturing techniques so completely that every component in their fleet was identical to every other component. This uniformity made their technology very reliable and very predictable. Human technology was different because humans were different. Earth was a chaotic planet where environmental conditions changed constantly. Humans had evolved to adapt and improvise and modify their tools to meet new challenges. Human ships were designed to be customized and upgraded and reconfigured based on whatever situation they encountered. Beth discovered that alien weapons systems expected to fight other alien weapon systems. They had been calibrated and tested against known technologies for centuries. When they encountered human ships that could change their configurations during battle, the alien systems did not know how to respond effectively. Admiral Jake Morrison was coordinating the defense of human space from his flagship USS Defiance when he received Beth's research data. Her findings confirmed what he had been seeing in battle reports from across the galaxy. Human ships were surviving longer than expected because they were confusing enemy targeting systems by constantly changing their signatures and configurations. Morrison decided to make this confusion official policy. He activated the Darwin Protocol, which encouraged every human ship captain to improvise and adapt their tactics as much as possible. Instead of following standard battle procedures, they were ordered to try new approaches and share successful innovations with other ships through the quantum communication network. The Darwin Protocol was named after the scientist who discovered that species survived by adapting to changing environments. Morrison believed that human fleets could evolve their tactics faster than enemy fleets could evolve countermeasures. The key was to never do the same thing twice and always be ready to try something completely different. Captain Tony Lee was commanding the heavy cruiser UHS Independence when he got the order to implement Darwin Protocol tactics. His ship was facing an entire Zephyrian squadron in the Vol 359 system. According to standard military thinking, he should have retreated immediately. Instead, he decided to see how much his ship could change during a single battle. Tony started by modifying his weapon frequencies to punch through Zephyrian shields more effectively. When the enemy adapted, he switched to a completely different type of energy beam. When they adapted again, he began firing physical projectiles instead of energy weapons. Every few minutes, his ship became something different and unexpected. The Zephyrian squadron was equipped with sophisticated computers that analyzed enemy capabilities and developed countermeasures automatically. But their computers kept getting confused because the Independence never stayed the same long enough for analysis to be completed. Every time they thought they understood what they were fighting, the human ship changed into something else. Tony also began modifying his ship's defensive systems in real time. He changed shield frequencies and armor configurations and engine signatures continuously throughout the battle. The enemy weapons were very accurate when they knew what they were shooting at, but they missed constantly when their target kept changing its fundamental characteristics. Back in the Centauri belt, Sam Rodriguez was watching his trap unfold perfectly. The Keth Armada had arrived and detected what appeared to be a massive human fleet defending the mining colonies. The holographic projectors were working flawlessly, creating images of battleships and carriers that look completely real from a distance. The Keth commander was confused because intelligence reports had indicated that only a small defense force was stationed at Centauri. Now his sensors were showing dozens of major warships arranged in a defensive formation that suggested the mining colonies were much more important than anyone had realized. He ordered his fleet to approach carefully and prepare for a major battle. Sam watched the enemy formation spread out and move into attack positions designed to counter a large conventional fleet. The Keth ships were arranging themselves according to standard tactical doctrine that had been developed over thousands of years of warfare. They were preparing to fight the Ghost Fleet exactly the way they would fight a real fleet. While the enemy was focused on the Phantom battleship, Sam's real ships moved into position for a surprise attack. His 12 vessels were tiny compared to the Keth dreadnoughts, but they were fast and maneuverable and equipped with the most advanced human weapons. More importantly, they were positioned where the enemy was not expecting them. The attack began when Sam's ship struck the Keth supply vessels at the rear of the formation. These ships carried fuel and ammunition and spare parts for the entire armada. They were lightly defended because no one expected them to be targeted during the main battle. Sam's squadron destroyed or disabled most of the supply ships before the enemy even realized what was happening. Without their supply ships, the Keth Armada was trapped in the Centauri system. They could not return home without fuel, and they could not continue fighting without ammunition. Worse yet, they were still trying to engage a fleet that did not actually exist while real human ships were picking apart their logistics network. The battle reports from Centauri spread across human space through the quantum communication network within minutes. Other human commanders began adapting Sam's ghost ship tactic for their own situations. Some used holographic projectors to make small ships look like large ships. Others used them to make damaged ships look undamaged or to create false targets that drew enemy fire away from real targets. Dr. Collins received data from dozens of battles and confirmed her theory about alien technology. The more human ships changed and adapted, the less effective enemy weapons became. Alien computers and targeting systems had been designed to fight predictable opponents. When they encountered truly unpredictable opponents, they began to malfunction. or make serious errors, President Wells reviewed the strategic situation and realized that something remarkable was happening. Human forces were not just surviving against overwhelming odds. In some cases, they were actually winning. The quantum communication network was allowing successful tactics to spread instantly across the galaxy while failed approaches were quickly identified and abandoned. The aliens had expected to defeat humanity through superior numbers and firepower. They had not expected to face an enemy that could evolve its tactics faster than they could develop countermeasures. Every human victory taught lessons that were immediately shared with every other human fleet. Every alien victory against humans was analyzed and countered before it could be repeated, Morrison updated his strategic assessment and sent a message to all human commanders. The enemy had made a critical mistake by attacking all human colonies simultaneously. This gave humanity access to more data about alien capabilities than they had ever possessed before. Every battle was a learning opportunity that made the next battle more likely to succeed. The tide of war was beginning to turn not because humans had better technology or larger fleets, but because they had something the aliens did not understand. They had the ability to change and adapt. Commander Julie White stood on the bridge of her stealth ship, as Shadow, and looked at the most dangerous mission any human had ever attempted. Her small fleet of 6 vessels was about to penetrate deep into Keth space and attack the one target that no enemy had ever touched in over 1,000 years. They were going to strike at Keth Prime itself. The plan was called Operation Breakout, and it was based on a simple idea that most military strategists would call insane. Instead of defending human colonies against overwhelming enemy forces, humanity would attack the enemy homeworlds while their fleets were busy with the siege. The psychological impact would be more valuable than any military victory. Julie had volunteered for this mission even though everyone knew it was probably suicide. Her ships were fast and nearly invisible to most sensors, but they were also fragile. If the Keth detected them before they reached their target, the entire fleet would be destroyed within minutes. They had one chance to succeed and no chance to escape if they failed. The journey to Keth Prime took 8 days through hyperspace routes that no human had ever traveled before. Julie's ship stayed far away from known shipping lanes and avoided any system that might have sensor stations or patrol fleets. They moved like ghosts through empty space, guided only by stolen navigation data and careful calculations. While Julie was traveling toward the Keth homeworld, Dr. Paul Mitchell was preparing for an even stranger mission. His target was not a planet or a military base, but something far more dangerous to the enemy. He was going to attack the Zephyrian core worlds with ideas instead of weapons. Paul led a team of 12 human scientists and engineers who had spent months studying Zephyrian society and technology. They had learned that the collective was organized around rigid hierarchies where innovation was controlled by government committees. New ideas had to be approved by multiple levels of bureaucracy before they could be implemented. This system produced very reliable technology, but it also prevented rapid adaptation and creative thinking. Paul's plan was to use quantum entanglement communicators to make direct contact with Zephyrian civilians and share human technological innovations with them. Once ordinary Zephyrians started experimenting with human ideas, their society would begin to change in ways that their government could not control. The effect would spread like a virus through their entire civilization. The first part of Paul's mission was to get close enough to Zephyrian space to establish communication links. His team used a modified cargo ship that looked like a standard merchant vessel. They approached the border system slowly and carefully while broadcasting normal commercial identification codes. Back at Earth, Admiral Morrison was coordinating the largest human fleet action in history. The Battle of the Nexus Corridor would determine whether humanity could break out of the alien siege and carry the war to enemy territory. Morrison had gathered every available warship from across human space for one massive assault on the enemy blockade. The Nexus Corridor was a natural hyperspace route that connected human space to the core regions of the galaxy. Enemy fleets had blocked this route to prevent human ships from reaching alien territories. Morrison's plan was to punch through the blockade with overwhelming force and open a path for follow-up operations. Morrison knew that this battle would be different from all the previous fighting. The aliens had learned to expect human unpredictability and had adapted their tactics accordingly. They were no longer using rigid formations that could be confused by unconventional attacks. Instead, they had developed flexible response protocols that could counter various human innovations. The human fleet assembled at the edge of the Nexus corridor consisted of over 300 ships, including everything from massive battleships to small escort vessels. Every captain had been briefed on the Darwin Protocol and encouraged to use whatever tactics seemed most effective. But Morrison also knew that raw improvisation would not be enough against an enemy that was learning to anticipate human creativity. The battle began when human scout ships detected the enemy blockade force. The aliens had positioned over 500 vessels in a complex defensive network that covered all possible approach routes. Keth dreadnoughts provided heavy firepower, while Zephyrian battle carriers contributed advanced sensors and electronic warfare capabilities. It was the most formidable defensive position that humans had ever faced. Morrison ordered the first wave of attacks to begin with conventional assault tactics that the enemy would recognize and understand. Human battleships engaged alien dreadnoughts in dark firepower exchanges, while cruisers and destroyers attempted to flank the enemy formation. The aliens responded exactly as their tactical doctrine suggested they should respond, but the conventional attack was only a distraction. While the enemy focused on countering standard human tactics, Morrison's second wave began using innovations that had never been tried before. Ships that appeared to be disabled suddenly came back to life and attacked from unexpected directions. Damaged vessels used their hull breaches as improvised weapon ports. Escape pods were converted into guided missiles that could penetrate enemy defenses. Captain Rebecca Turner commanded one of the most unusual attacks of the battle. Her heavy cruiser USS Relentless had taken severe damage to its primary weapons, but Turner realized she could use the damage to her advantage. She flew her ship directly at an enemy dreadnought and used the jagged edges of her broken hull as a giant cutting tool. The alien ship was not designed to defend against a vessel that used battle damage as a weapon. The fighting in the Nexus corridor lasted for 6 hours and involved tactics that military historians would study for decades. Human ships transformed themselves during battle, turning weaknesses into strengths and finding ways to use every available resource as a weapon. Alien forces tried to adapt, but they could not change fast enough to keep up with human innovation. Meanwhile, Julie White's stealth fleet finally arrived at Keth Prime after 8 days of dangerous travel. The planet below them was the ancient heart of the Keth Empire and the birthplace of their warrior culture. No enemy had ever come close to this world. The Keth believed it was impossible for any hostile force to reach their sacred homeworld. Julie's ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Keth Prime system and immediately activated their most advanced stealth systems. They looked like small asteroids or pieces of space debris to most sensors. The orbital defenses around Keth Prime were designed to stop massive invasion fleets, not tiny infiltration forces. The psychological attack began when Julie's ships appeared in the skies above Keth Prime and started broadcasting messages in perfect Keth language. The messages were not threats or demands for surrender. Instead, they were simple statements of fact. Human vessels had reached the Keth homeworld. The heart of the Empire was no longer safe. The warrior culture that had never known defeat on their own soil was now facing the impossible to impact on. Keth society was immediate and devastating. Warriors who had spent their entire lives believing that their homeworld was untouchable suddenly saw alien ships flying overhead. The government tried to suppress news of the human presence, but too many civilians had seen the broadcasts. Panic spread through the population as people realized that their military had failed to protect the most important world in their empire. Paul Mitchell achieved his first breakthrough when his team successfully established quantum communication links with Zephyrian civilians in 3 different star systems. They began sharing human innovations in manufacturing and engineering that could improve everyday life for ordinary citizens. The ideas were simple but revolutionary in a society that discouraged individual creativity within days Zephyrian. Civilians were building devices and solving problems using methods that their government had never approved. Some created more efficient power systems for their homes. Others developed better tools for their jobs. A few bold individuals even began questioning why innovation had to be controlled by committees when individual creativity could produce such remarkable results. The effect spread rapidly through Zephyrian society as people shared the human ideas with their friends and families. Government officials tried to stop the unauthorized innovation, but they could not track every quantum communication or monitor every basement workshop. The virus of human creativity was loose in their civilization and growing stronger every day. Admiral Morrison received reports from both Operation Breakout missions while he was still fighting in the Nexus corridor. Julie's psychological attack on Keth Prime was causing chaos in enemy command structures as Keth leaders struggled to respond to the impossible situation. Pol's ideological infiltration of Zephyrian space was creating civil unrest as ordinary citizens began demanding the right to innovate freely. The Battle of the Nexus corridor finally ended when the alien blockade force withdrew to protect their homeworlds from further human attacks. Morrison's fleet had suffered heavy casualties, but they had achieved their primary objective. The route to enemy territory was now open and human. Forces could carry the war beyond the borders of human space, but the real victory was not military but psychological. The aliens had learned that humanity could not be contained or controlled through conventional means. Human ships could reach any target in the galaxy. Commander Alex Stone had not expected to find himself having a friendly conversation with aliens who had been trying to kill him just 3 weeks earlier. His science vessel, EOHS Explorer, was docked next to a damaged Zephyrian research ship called the Infinite Logic, and both crews were working together to solve a problem that threatened everyone in the local system. The problem was a massive space anomaly that had appeared near the binary stars of the Kepler system. It looked like a tear in space itself that was growing larger every hour. Energy readings showed that it might collapse into a black hole or explode like a supernova. Either way, it would destroy everything within several light years, including both human and alien ships that were trapped in the area. Alex had encountered the Zephyrian ship 3 days ago when both vessels were trying to escape the expanding anomaly. Instead of fighting, they had started talking because neither crew wanted to die in a cosmic disaster. The Zephyrian captain was a scientist named Callahan who had been experimenting with human-style adaptive modifications to his ship's systems. Callahan explained that younger Zephyrian researchers had become fascinated by human technology. After analyzing battle data from the war, they had started questioning why their civilization always followed rigid procedures when human improvisation seemed to produce better results. Some had begun conducting unauthorized experiments with flexible designs and modular systems. Alex realized that the war was changing both sides in unexpected ways. Human creativity was spreading through alien societies while humans were learning from alien knowledge and experience. The conflict that was supposed to destroy one side or the other was actually creating something new that neither side had anticipated. The space anomaly required both human and Zephyrian expertise to understand and hopefully to stop. Alex's crew had advanced sensors and analytical equipment while Callahan's team possessed theoretical knowledge about exotic physics that humans had never encountered. Neither crew could solve the problem alone, but together they might find a solution. While Alex and Callahan worked together in space, something similar was happening throughout the galaxy. Young Keth warriors had begun studying human tactical innovations and applying them to their own fighting styles. Traditional Keth doctrine emphasized discipline and uniform formations, but human influence was encouraging individual initiative and creative thinking. Keth Commander Thax was one of the warriors who had embraced human-style tactics. He had been fighting against human forces for months and had developed enormous respect for their adaptability and courage. When his ship encountered a human vessel carrying medical supplies to a plague-stricken colony, Thax made a decision that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of the war. Instead of attacking the medical ship, Thax offered to provide escort protection through dangerous space controlled by pirates and raiders. The human captain was suspicious at first, but agreed when Thax explained that warriors should protect civilians regardless of which species they belonged to. The mission was completed successfully, and both crews learned that cooperation could achieve things that combat never could. Similar incidents were happening across the war zone as individual commanders from all sides began to question the purpose of the conflict. The war had started because alien leaders feared human expansion and innovation, but prolonged contact with humanity was proving that these fears were based on misunderstandings rather than real threats. President Karen Wells received reports from intelligence officers about the changing attitudes among enemy forces. Many alien commanders were expressing doubts about the war's objectives, while some were actively seeking opportunities to cooperate with human forces. The monolithic enemy that had threatened to destroy humanity was beginning to fracture along generational lines. Dr. Emma Foster analyzed the trend and concluded that human adaptability was having an unexpected effect on alien societies. Species that had remained unchanged for thousands of years were suddenly experiencing rapid cultural evolution. Contact with humanity was acting like a catalyst that accelerated social and technological development throughout the galaxy. The breakthrough came when Alex Stone and Callahan successfully stabilized the space anomaly using a combination of human improvisation and Zephyrian theoretical knowledge. Their solution required constant adjustments and modifications that no single species could have managed alone. The success demonstrated that cooperation between different civilizations could solve problems that would be impossible for any one civilization to handle. News of the joint human Zephyrian success spread rapidly through both military and civilian networks. Other mixed crews began attempting similar cooperation projects, and most of them achieved remarkable results. The quantum communication network allowed successful techniques to be shared instantly, while failed approaches were quickly identified and avoided. Admiral Morrison was coordinating the defense of the outer colonies when he received an unprecedented message. Keth Sub-Commander Thax and Zephyrian research leader Nim were requesting permission to meet with human representatives under a flag of truce. They claimed to represent younger members of their species who wanted to explore alternatives to continued warfare. The meeting took place on a neutral space station that had been abandoned during the early stages of the conflict. Morrison brought a small diplomatic team while the aliens arrived with evidence that they were acting without official authorization from their governments. Both sides knew they were taking enormous risks, but they also knew that the war was destroying everything they claimed to be protecting. Thax explained that many Keth warriors had lost faith in their leaders after the attack on Keth. Prime proved that their homeworld was not invulnerable. The warrior culture was based on the idea that strength and honor could overcome any challenge, but human ingenuity had shown that there were problems that could not be solved through traditional martial virtues alone. Nim described how human ideas were spreading through Zephyrian society despite government efforts to suppress unauthorized innovation. Civilian populations were demanding the right to experiment and adapt and create new solutions to old problems. The rigid hierarchies that had maintained order for millennia were beginning to collapse under pressure from citizens who had tasted the freedom of creative thinking. Morrison realized that both alien representatives were describing the same phenomenon that human sociologists had observed throughout history. When different cultures came into contact, they changed each other in ways that no one could predict or control. The war had been intended to prevent this mixing, but it had actually accelerated the process by forcing intense interaction between human and alien civilizations. The proposal that emerged from the meeting was radical beyond anything that political leaders on any side would have considered just months earlier. Instead of continuing a war that was tearing apart the fabric of galactic society, why not explore the potential of combining their civilizations' different strengths and capabilities? President Wells reviewed the proposal with her advisors, and military commanders. The risks were enormous because there was no guarantee that alien populations would accept such dramatic changes. But the potential benefits were equally enormous because cooperation could accomplish things that no single species could achieve alone. The decision was made to present the proposal to the Galactic Council as a formal alternative to continued warfare. Wells would argue that humanity had never wanted to conquer other species, but had only wanted to explore and grow alongside them. The galaxy was vast enough for all civilizations to expand and develop without coming into conflict with each other. The final speech was delivered not by a politician or a general, but by Dr. Beth Collins, who had discovered the fundamental differences between human and alien technology. She explained to the assembled representatives of 47 species that diversity was not a threat to be eliminated, but a resource to be treasured and protected. Collins demonstrated how human adaptability could enhance alien reliability while alien knowledge could guide human creativity toward more productive directions. The combination would produce technologies and solutions that no single civilization could develop alone. The choice was between a future of endless conflict or a future of unlimited growth and discovery. The vote was closer than anyone had expected, but the proposal passed by a narrow margin. The galactic cooperative that emerged from the ashes of the war was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Mixed crews of humans and aliens began pushing the boundaries of known space, while joint research teams tackled problems that had puzzled scientists for centuries. Years later, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the first intergalactic exploration vessel and watched the Andromeda Galaxy growing larger in the main view screen. The ship was commanded by a human captain, but crewed by representatives from dozens of different species. Each contributed their unique skills and perspectives to the mission of exploring beyond the boundaries of their home galaxy. Morrison reflected on the strange path that had brought them to this moment. The aliens had feared human expansion and innovation so much that they had tried to destroy humanity completely. But their attack had forced such intense contact between different civilizations